Hi everyone, welcome back to another tutorial. So for this one I thought we would switch it up and do a watercolor background and then go on top with colored pencils for the flower. So if you're just here for the tutorial, I will put the timestamp right here now, but I'm just going to explain quickly and show the products that I'm using. So I will be using the Faber Castell Polychromos for our flower, but I might do a light wash of watercolor first. So if you don't want to use the watercolors, you could use the Albrecht Durer watercolor pencils, which are also from the Faber-Castell line. And the nice thing about those is they are the exact same colors as the Polychromos, so you could still follow along with that. Or you could leave the background out completely and just go on top with the flower. And the light wash of watercolors that I use would just be your first base layer of putting your color down. So you could follow along like that. I am using a hot pressed watercolor block, and I'm only going to keep it on the block while I'm doing the watercolors. Once we get to our colored pencils, I will take it off the block completely. I've got 2 jars of water here, one for dirty water, one for clean water. And it's dirty right now because I was just cleaning up my my lemon yellow, my azo yellow there because it was a little bit dirty. And I do want a nice bright yellow for this. So I will be using my M-Gram watercolor paints for this. And I've got a couple of brushes over here. So I've got this big brush from Royal and Langnickel that I'm going to use to wet the background. And I've also got my size 8 silver black velvet and my size 8 Princeton Neptune round as well. And then I've just got this little cloth here so I can blot off some water on my brushes for any water control or things like that. And everything will be linked down in the description below. I will have the reference photo and the sketch available of the flower for you. So let's just jump into this right now. And I'm just going to put a couple little dots here for some paint for the background. I don't want too much water because I don't want these colors to run too much in the background. And I think I'm going to do the background in 2 stages. So we'll sort of do 2 wet on wets because I don't want the nice yellows and reds to mix in with the blues and the greens that we're going to put down. So I'm going to try to do it in 2 stages and we'll see how that turns out. So first I'm going to pick up that azo yellow. If you don't have azo yellow, just use any sort of cool yellow like a lemon yellow or whatever you have available. And then I'm going to go in with my Scarlet Pyrrole here. This is a nice orangey red. Okay. And then I'm going to go in with my Pyrrole red as well. So this is sort of a mix between a warm red and a cool red, like the alizarin crimson. So if you don't have this, you could always mix your orange and your alizarin crimson together and get sort of a similar color. And I'm just going to grab a little bit more of this just to really get this color where I want it. Maybe a little bit of orange to tone it down. So I'm sort of mixing that orange and that pyrrole, the Scarlet Pyrrole, to get sort of like an orangey red. Okay. And if we put it down on the paper and we don't like it, we can always go in and fix it after. So I'm just going to start with the big brush and I'm going to start wetting the background, and I'm going to wet so our flowers are sort of here, here, over here, and like there's a nice big one here. But I'm going to wet a little bit further around those areas too. And because we put that masking fluid down, that's going to help. But I still, you know, want to be somewhat precise around the flower, just in case, because masking fluid's always not 100%. You know, you can still get little bubbles and stuff in the masking fluid, so I want to be a little bit careful, but okay. So I'm just wetting a little bit more around where I see those flowers are going to be, where those colors are going to be. And this paper does dry quickly, so that's why I'm trying to do it in like 2 stages, because I did pick, you know, a nice bigger piece so we could really, you know, work on the background and work on the flower. But if your paper doesn't dry as quickly, then you can certainly take more time, or you can slow this video down and watch it again. But once I start working on the background, I will have to start working a bit quickly. Okay, so I'm going to go in with my silver black velvet now, and I'm going to start picking up some colors. So I'm going to take this yellow and I'm going to start laying this in sort of here. And I'm going to take my Princeton Neptune, get all the water off of it, and sort of almost stop that color from going a little bit. And we've got a little bit of color in there from it mixing. That's fine. That doesn't bother me. But I don't want the colors to travel too much. So I'm just trying to make, you know, somewhat of a flower shape. And I'm looking here where this one starts. Okay, and again, I'm just going to take that and sort of stop the edges from going so much. And if a little bit bleeds out, that's fine, because we are going on top with more colors, but okay. So I'm going to grab this orangey color here now, and I'm going to start dabbing that in. And again, so I'm just taking that brush and sort of wiping some of the water away, so it's giving it a stopping point. And then I can kind of take this brush and work that color. And I can sort of work it to where I need it to go. But I can still soften it out, soften the edges out. I'm going to take a little bit more of this yellow and sort of just let them meet a little bit. Okay. And then I'm going to go in with the red here. And I'm going to start putting that in over here. And again, with that dry brush, I'm kind of, you know, stopping that paint from going any further. I like to keep both brushes in my hand so I can, you know, go back and forth. And I'm just starting to make maybe little indications of some petal shapes. But it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, and I'm going to go in with that yellow and just drop a little bit down here. And a little bit down here where I see those colors. And I might take a smidge of this and drop this over here. And where it's already starting to dry, I'm just softening out any edges. And I really like this brush to do that. So I'm just doing little dabs over top of it. And sort of wiping anywhere I want a little more of a crisper line. Okay, I'm going to go back in with this color. I just want to brighten this up just a little bit and then blend it out. Okay. So I kind of like how that's looking. So I'm going to let these dry and then we'll go back in with our blues and our greens and sort of make the background really pop a little bit more. Okay, so as you can see, that sort of gave us a look of like out of focus flowers in the background. I just wanted to have some color going in the background. So now we're going to go in and do the same thing with our blue and our greens. And for that, I'm thinking my phthalo blue and my phthalo green. So in this set, I got cat hair on the palette. So in this set, this is the phthalo blue, and the phthalo green is phthalo cyanine green. So if you've got the M gram, that's what the one that I'm going to be using. But a phthalo green, whatever you have in your set, will work just as well. And if you don't have a phthalo green, you can use any green that you have and just mix it to the shade that you want. So if you want to add a little bit of blue in there, same with the phthalo blue, use whatever blue or whatever color that you want. Doesn't have to be whatever I'm using. You use whatever you have available. So I'm going to take that Princeton Neptune 8 round again, and I'm just going to start mixing up my colors. So this is a really pretty, like, sort of nice sky blue, or like just a nice general blue. I love this color, so I tend to use it a lot. I also like cerulean a lot, which is a lighter blue. But for this, I wanted something a little bit deeper, a little bit, you know, to sort of suggest the sky. And also, as you can notice here, I did get 2 new jars of water because I can never keep one of them clean. So I always start with just 2 jars of clean water. You can see here, this is a really nice, like, blue-green. You could even use a viridian if you want. Okay. So I'm going to use my big brush again and just wet the background. And as I'm wetting, I'm going to be slightly careful going around the colors that we've already laid down. I don't want to go over them completely. I'll go sort of up to the edge, and then we can soften that area as needed. And if the colors that you're using lift easily, then you could try doing this all in one, you know, swoop, especially if you're using like a hot pressed watercolor paper. But if you are using colored pencils, I'm not a big fan of the cold pressed watercolor paper. But if you are using cold pressed, then, you know, your colors probably won't lift as well. But these M-gram colors are fairly staining, and I like them for that, so I can go over and do multiple layers if I, you know, want to. So I really like that about them. They're also very pigmented, so, you know, usually 1 layer and I'm good. They're becoming one of my favorite watercolors. I had been using my Winsor and Newton watercolors for such a long time, and then I got a couple tubes of these just to try, and I just completely fell in love with them. So if you've never tried them, I would highly suggest you to try them. Okay, so I just want to get the paper wet enough that the paint's going to flow a little bit, but we don't want puddles, you know, on our paper. And the wetter it is, the more that paint's going to flow. Okay, so I'm going to go back in with my number 8 Silver Black Velvet, and I'm going to start with my blue, I think. And I'm just going to start putting this in places that I think that I want it, because this is going to cover most of the main area. And again, like I said before, you want to work fairly quickly when we're doing this wet on wet, especially on hot pressed paper. Okay. I'm going to start going in with that green now and just start laying this in. And if the 2 colors mix a little bit, that's fine. So I'm just, you know, really being kind of messy with this. I don't want it to be too precise, but I want, you know, the colors down there. And I'm going to go back in with the blue and just start filling in any areas that I think it needs it. You know, I want to get the paper pretty covered, and then we can start, you know, fixing areas that we need to. Okay. And I'm just going to go in and start picking up paint where I see there's puddles and dab it off on my cloth here. You could use a paper towel for this, doesn't have to be a cloth. But I don't want puddles here. So anywhere where the paper is buckling, this is hot pressed paper, so I find it does buckle a little bit more than, you know, regular paper. And I'm just going to use this same brush to start to go in and just soften some of these edges a little bit if we can. So I'm just trying to dab, mix some of that paint. And I'm going to just put a dab of that blue in there. So this doesn't have to be perfect, just have fun with it. And we're just trying something new, you know, something different, so. And I'm just going to use my paper towel to dab up places that, you know, the color's getting a little dark or getting a little muddy. So I'm just sort of letting these colors mix just a little bit at the edges now, just to get some of those harsh edges gone. And this probably would have been easier to do it all in one go, but I wanted to try something different. And how are you going to know if you like it or not if you don't try it? Okay. Just going to add a little bit more blue in a couple of areas. Just areas where I want it to pop a little bit more. Oops. Well, we'll make that blue there. No brush stroke is a bad brush stroke, even if you drop it, so. And again, I'm just going and softening it up. You can see I kind of just go along and play with it and until you get something that you like. So some areas are starting to dry, so you want to be careful where you're putting the paint. But I think I'm going to leave it at that for right now because I sort of like the out of focus of it. So I think that's where we're going to leave it. Just going to get that up. And sort of gives you an idea of what we're going for. So we're going to let that dry and then we'll come back and just do a little base layer on our flower. Okay, so we're going to remove our masking fluid now and see how the background around our little flower turned out. Now there's a couple of ways that you could do this. You could use your finger and remove the masking fluid like that. You could use a face cloth and gently go over the masking fluid. Or if you have like an eraser or something like that. But I have this that came with one of my masking fluids. And it's just sort of like a hard block. So I'm going to try this out and see how that goes. Usually I'll just go around with my finger and remove it. But, oh wow. This actually removes it pretty darn well. And I don't think that it's ruining the paper or anything. So that's kind of cool. And as you can see, since we've laid down the masking fluid, it doesn't ruin our pencil lines underneath. It doesn't really get rid of them all that much. So maybe we can just pull it off now. Oh, that's so satisfying. Look at that. This masking fluid is really nice. I've not had any problems with this ruining my paper, and it does a really thick layer. And even as you can see when we did the side where the brush was versus the other one, and then I did go over the brush because I thought it looked a little patchy. I mean, it still comes off super easy once you get it started. And I really enjoy this masking fluid. And that kind of works too. And then you're not getting the oils of your fingers on your work, although I'm constantly touching it. So there's that. Okay, so that's how our little flower looks, and it did pretty good. The masking fluid was pretty accurate. Not so much down here, but that's okay. We can kind of go in and soften that up, and maybe we'll do that real quick. I'll just take some water on my brush, get a little damp, and I might use a regular paper towel because that's kind of dirty right now. And I'm just going to go in and sort of try to soften some of these edges. And you could even pick up just a tiny little bit. Paint on your brush and just try to fill them in. Doesn't have to be perfect. But just the areas where I noticed there's, you know, a little bit bigger of a gap. You could always just take your flower and just make it slightly bigger on some of the edges, and I'll probably end up doing that, but that's one way to do it. You could kind of just sort of take the color and just go over the edges, or, you know, you could just not care about it. Doesn't matter. It's watercolor. Okay. So I'm going to take a little bit of this clean water here and get it down here so we can make a color for our rose. Our rose. I'm going to call this rose because I've been drawing roses a lot, but this is a tulip. Okay. So it's sort of like a mauvey color. And I have this quinacridone rose and dioxazine purple. So I'm going to mix these two together to get sort of a mauve color. And I might even just get a little bit more water there because I want to make sure I have enough to cover the whole flower. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of the dioxazine purple. And sort of make this nice mauve color. But to make it light, I do want to have enough water, and I'm just taking my brush and dipping into the clean water just to water it down enough, because there are some areas that are pretty light. And then we'll go over top with our colored pencils and, you know, work on our darks. Okay, so you can always take this too on a separate piece of paper. Let's see. So you can always take it. Now this is just Bristol paper, so it's not perfect. I was using this for Copic markers, but you can sort of take it and just test it to see if that's a color that you like. And I'm going to start working up here. And actually, I'm going to switch to my silver black velvet brush, just because this has a little bit better of a point to it. And some of these areas I want to really get into. And I'm sort of brushing the pigment away from those top edges because those are going to be our lightest edges. So I want the pigment to move down into the bigger areas. And I'm going to work it so that I have a nice wet edge along where I'm working so that it doesn't dry and we don't get any wet edges. And I just see that I had some water splatter there, so we're just going to pick that up and carry on. And I'm just covering the whole surface because this is sort of our base layer, just to cover the white of the paper with the flower. Now you could do this whole flower with watercolors if you want. Just follow the basic techniques that I'm going to be doing, you know, looking at where your lights are, where your darks are. Okay. And then for the stem, I'm going to get my brush pretty dry and pick up some of this green color that we used for the background. And that's what I'm going to use for the stem. So I want just enough water for the color to flow, because this is a pretty small area. And because I just put a thin layer of color down on the flower, it's already dry there. There, so we'll let that dry. And I'm just seeing a couple spots here where there's a couple spots where the color's not laying down perfectly, so I'm just gonna go in and drop a little bit of that color. That's a little too pigmented, so we'll fix that with our colored pencils. That's fine. So I'm going to go ahead, let this dry. This will be part 1 for this tutorial, and then part 2 we'll come back, do our colored pencils, and make this look like a little rose, and then we've got this fun background. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please like the video, subscribe, give a thumbs up if you can, and thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye!